This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. First, I want to play a small clip. David Harding has had a rough time on CNBC over the years. No, I'm sure he personally has never felt too rough. David's a pretty smart guy. He's been pretty successful, but he's gone on CNBC many times, and he just gets these god-awful questions. People don't know what they're asking him. They don't know what they're doing, or maybe they have a slight agenda. If they're Joe Kernan, Joe just doesn't seem to like the idea that David might have these strategies, these quant trend following strategies. But David always keeps a stiff upper lip. He's always very calm, cool, and collected, and makes the case for trend following. And he's been consistently doing this on these CNBC interviews for multiple years now. I've played excerpts of the clips on my podcast. And I'm going to play another one today because David is leading the charge. And I love the fact that he's leading the charge. But recently, after having this Joe Kernan interview that was just awful, I think the second one that was awful, David appeared on CNBC, and it looks like he appeared at his offices in London, and a very nice lady, a very attractive lady from CNBC, interviewed David. Great interview. She did a nice job. I think she let David explain and expand upon what he does. Let me play a small clip.
When I started trading in or studying the futures markets in the 1980s, I teamed up with my partners and we used computers to do something rather predictable, really, which is we used computers to test some of the popular ideas of how you trading strategies for making money in financial markets. And perhaps the most popular of popular trading ideas was trend following. And you have a set of rules which says, go with the flow, buy soybeans when they're going up. And we tested all these rules and we found that as far as past data is concerned, they worked. This is very surprising. They're not supposed to work, certainly not according to the academic orthodoxy. The efficient market theory says that the market has no predictable patterns in it whatsoever. So we were faced with a choice between the evidence of our senses, the fact that these strategies appeared, however you looked at it, whichever way you turned them, you've turned them upside down or inside out or back to front, they just worked and worked and worked on past data. That didn't mean they were going to work in the future, but it was encouraging. On the other hand, the theory is that they can't work. So as young men, we were faced with either backing the evidence of our senses or going with the orthodoxy. And fortunately, we did what young men and women do, which was we took a gamble and started a company. And we didn't, of course, know that these ideas would work, but surprisingly and conveniently, they have worked for the next 25 years. And that's about the amount of time you need to build a successful business, which is what I've managed to do on the back of it.
Of course, that's a very straightforward introduction from David. Trend following is a very well-known quantity, a very well-known strategy to anyone that's awake. Now, yes, I admit that I do have a firm called Trend Following, in full disclosure, and hate me for registering the name trendfollowing.com back in the mid-1990s. Hate me for it. But guess what? I alone am not trend following. Trend following is a strategy that you could argue goes back, I believe it's David Ricardo, 1700s, and a fantastic paper that outlines trend following history by Stig Osgard, one of the turtles. It's free on the internet. Take a read. But trend following goes back a long time. I mean, it is the strategy that's about finding a positive mathematical expectation across a diversified portfolio. It's the idea that on your trading, you're going to have 30 to 40% winners. Your winners are going to be much bigger than your losers. You're going to cut your losers short quickly. You're going to have a lot of small losses because you're never going to know when the markets are going to trend. That big picture that I just described right there is employed by David Harding. It's employed by Larry Hite, by Ed Seykota, by Richard Donchian in the 1950s, by Bill Dunn, by Ken Tropin, by the guys at Aspect Capital, TransTrend. You name it. Go down the list of the podcast episodes that discuss trend following on my show. Yes, I am happy to lead the charge for my world about trend following. But trend following is a strategy, and it's well known. Now, of course, you've got to do a little homework. You might have to read something. You might have to know a little bit more than what the system or the machine has told you to believe. If you wake up each day and the only thing you know about investing is what the Fidelity family tells you, buy and hold, value, this, that. Yeah, sure, you might not know about trend following. But for those with a pulse, pretty well-known quantity. Which leads me into what I described on Twitter on August 5th at 3:09 p.m. I put a tweet out and I said, the most misinformed description of trend following seen yet. And I linked to a Bloomberg article. I sourced the author, a guy named Noah Smith. I had no idea who Noah Smith was. That's not taking anything away from Noah. I didn't know who he was at all. No clue who Noah was. God, the article was terrible. The trend is your friend till it isn't. Following stock market trends seems like a good idea, but it usually ends up costing investors money. So I read this article, and he talks about trend following being related to the hot hand fallacy. Compares trend following to option sellers selling deep out of the money options. Now, of course, for those out there that know something about trend following is long volatility. Trend following is the exact opposite of that. Literally, it's like writing an article comparing trend following to the strategies of long-term capital management. You know, the idea that you walk out there and you try and pick a nickel up in front of a steamroller. And boy, that's such easy thing to do. And then one day the steamroller runs over you. Trend following is the opposite. It's the opposite strategy. So clearly this author got it way wrong. He's not even close to the strategy of trend following. The strategy of trend following employed by many men and women over the decades, having pulled billions upon billions of dollars of profit out of the market. So again, I make one tweet. I say this is just a terribly misinformed article. I don't know the author. Boom! Here comes the fight back. I guess I should have known. I should have known it was coming. So let me go over some of this. And I think there's good lessons to be here. This isn't like a retrospective because I got into, I don't know what they call this, a tweet war or something. So I called this guy out. I basically said he was clueless. I said, get a clue, please. That was my original tweet. He responded finally, and a bunch of other people jumped in. It wasn't like I was the only person in the industry to say, hey, this guy got it really wrong. And all he had to do was correct himself. Now, I should take a step back. I later found out that this guy is a pretty popular blogger. And he has his PhD, and he teaches finance or econ. It's Stony Brook, I believe. Seems like a pretty young guy. Maybe he didn't know what trend following was. I don't think he did, clearly. Or he had some vague idea of something else and was using the wrong terminology or the wrong jargon. Who cares? He got it wrong. Just wrong. I called him out. He responded with question marks. To my tweet, he responded with question marks. I asked him if he knew what trend following was. He tried to change the subject, called me a guru, I think somebody jumped in and said, well, I've got books to sell. I gave him a bunch of links to third-party research papers. He immediately came back. Now, I thought this was really, it's telling. I mean, here's a guy who's writing for Bloomberg. He seems to be a known quantity. And he immediately comes back and he assumes the links I'm giving him are self-serving pieces that I've written or something. And he says, well, to the effect that if I force him to go down this path and he finds something unsavory about me, that could be bad for me. And I just kept saying, hey, look, just change your article. You got it wrong. Just investigate, find out what trend following is. I told him to fix the article. That's basically what happened. This poor guy, he kept lashing back out. Oh, there's multiple definitions of trend following. And that trend following was a marketing buzz phrase employed by me. So trend following was all about me, all about Mike Covel. Now, clearly, this is a guy who tweets, I don't know how many tweets he tweets a day, but a lot. So he doesn't really have time to get off the soapbox. He doesn't have time to do any homework, right? He's just got to respond and save face in the moment of right now. And this is society today, right? Respond and save face in the moment of right now. Now, mind you, I wasn't trying to pick a particular fight other than to say his article, his perspective was clueless. That's not an attack. It was a factual statement. And what I will never relate to about society today is the response is not to take your medicine and say, I was clueless about that. No, it's the ad hominem attacks. It's the straw men. It's the red herrings. It's the change the subject. It's Mike Covel's an evil motherfucker who can't possibly know what he's talking about. Come on, look, I've been down the path of these kinds of fights and battles so many times in the last 15 years. So I don't take any of this stuff personally. I mean, if you really, if you get your jollies off by calling me names or whatever you want to call me, I mean, bring it on. That's whatever gets your rocks off. I really don't care. Again, I was only after the very narrow issue of trend following in his article being characterized in the wrong way. And I was simply correcting. Now, maybe I should have said something nice in my original tweet instead of calling him clueless, but clueless was a fact. So I have this little go round with him, and then one of his followers jumps in. One of his followers jumps in and says that trend following is a class of strategies. That I should feel bad for having a business. I can't speak to the risk or legitimacy of these strategies. And it gets better, that I was really unfortunate that I exist, not as a human being, but as a character I've created in order to make a living. And this is where the subject of this debate gets more interesting, to me at least. And this is the societal problem. Is when I started to watch these guys, you start to watch their minds turning, even in a few tweets. They didn't like that I was coming out and saying this. Because I make money in a way they don't like. They didn't like that I was coming out and saying this because I didn't get a PhD. I never had a desire to get a PhD. If someone has one, great. There are some brilliant people with PhDs that have appeared on my podcast. But you know what? Every last one of them has been humble as you know what. And the whole PhD thing is not part of the message. But that was different with this. You could just feel it. Covel doesn't have the academic chops. Covel doesn't have the insight to tell us about trend following. Now, I don't really feel the need to defend myself in terms of what I know or what I don't know. I'll let the market decide that. But I have put a fairly decent dent into the arena about the subject of trend following across 5 books, a film, and a podcast that seems to keep growing. So when I think about this little exchange that I had, I see lots of lessons. Again, it's a great opportunity to clarify what trend following trading is. If you don't like the fact that part of my business has to do with trend following trading, if you don't like the fact that I've written books about trend following, and somehow or another, because I have written books about trend following trading that happen to be sold in the marketplace, that I'm incapable now of having an honest or accurate or objective view on the subject. How messed up is the thinking of some people out there? Because what I really find interesting is this angle of where does one make their money from? Right? Where does one make their money from? Everyone has to get paid. That means you in the audience, the folks that I'm debating in this little interchange that took place. Oh yeah, they got to make money somehow or another. Noah's getting money from some university to teach econ classes. I teach people, not at a university, not at econ classes. If you don't like it, that's great. If someone doesn't like Noah, that's great. But everyone has to get paid. And if you do it in an honest way, if there's a track record for how you do it, if there's an understanding of what you do, it always cracks me up how some of these folks out there in the system think that they've got the holier than thou approach. That there's this only one way to go about life. And the way you go about it is memorizing everything from the age of 6 years old, all through grade school, middle school, high school, college, graduate school, getting your doctoral thesis completed. And then you will have arrived. I'll tell you right now, there's a hell of a lot of PhDs out there. And I will be cocky for a second. They've made far less of a dent on a major subject than I have. And that should be inspiration to those of you that are listening out there. Because it's not about the old system. It's not about the old system. It's about getting it right. What's the story? What's the concept? What are we arguing? What are we trying to learn? In this case, it was trend following. In my mind, it was a much larger issue. It was a much larger societal issue. Because they wouldn't back down in the face of. Maybe this millennial generation. They can't admit to being wrong. They can't just say, hey, I made a mistake. They have to save face. And the way they save face is just smile and make accusations and say crazy stuff in response. Why go over this in depth? I think it's useful. I think it's useful to understand how people think. This is the advantage you have as a trader, as an investor. This is what you're up against. Oh, will trend following continue to work? Will trend following be dead? How can it with so many people not having a clue? A lot of issues in this little monologue, a lot of different things peeking out behind the curtains in society. I must tell you, I'm so glad that I don't watch cable news on a regular basis, that I don't have to know about some of these debates, that I'm not trying to put out 100 tweets a day. At some point in time, everybody has to acknowledge this information overflow, this information overload. There's too much. How the hell do you ever enjoy your life if your ego is so fragile that the only thing you can do is just to keep tweeting massive amounts of tweets out just to keep it going because you're so worried in that one moment that somebody is going to see you as weak, where everyone already sees you as weak to begin with? So what happened? What was the end result? Well, as I was preparing for this podcast, I went back and looked. And it appears Noah Smith, the professor, the reporter, the writer for Bloomberg, deleted all of his tweets. So the entire conversation we had back a week ago, my tweets are all still there. His are all gone. So I could only imagine at some point in time, somebody tapped him on the shoulder and said, hey, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. Somebody finally said to him, hey, you got this wrong. Now in his world, I looked at his feed. In his world, this is one minor subject, right? One minor little thing. I, however, like the subject of trend following. I like getting it right. I like showing people about it. I like having guests on my podcast that get it right. So if I see an article, I don't care who the reporter is. I don't care who the writer is. If they say something really, really inane, I'm going to rip them. I'm going to rip them. I'm going to rip the content of the article. I'm going to rip the writer. If they want to correct it, they can. If they want to have one of these interchanges with me, they can. I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.